Right. Hello, everybody. We are back for another episode of Sooner Cast. Got a special guest on with us. Last week we had Parker Thune, and I reached out to Ryan, and man, he was right away just, yeah, sure, man. So I really appreciate him getting on. I'll let him introduce himself. And also, too, before we get started, like, I listen to Ryan every morning just like I listen to Parker in the afternoons and stuff, and they're like, "Man, you just bring on all the guys you like." Like, well, yeah, I do. It's my podcast, so screw off. So I don't care. So Ryan, I'll let you introduce yourself, man.
Yeah, I mean, funny. I actually ended up taking Parker's gig. I obviously cover Oklahoma for Sooners on SI with the great John Hoover. I had a bunch of different names back when Parker was doing it. And yeah, I do the franchise morning show with Eddie Radosevich. So, never a dull moment between the radio life and covering Oklahoma just in general. But happy to hop aboard.
Well, I appreciate you. And we were talking before we got on. It's like, man, it'll be really awesome if we get this Mateer news before we got on. But of course, it didn't happen. So now all of us have our Twitter machines on and going. So we'll jump right into it. What's your thought on this Mateer situation? I know we should relax as OU fans. Is what everybody's telling us. So, what do you think, man?
Yeah, it just feels like if everything would happen faster, I think everyone would feel comfortable. Whether that goes all the way back to Mateer entering the portal during week 1 of the winter window instead of taking this past week and talking to his family, all that stuff. But Oklahoma's inaction a week ago, I think, said everything, basically. It didn't even look like the Sooners were looking for a plan B, plan C. They weren't even really getting to work on finding their what would be third string, whoever's going to compete with Jet New for third string. And so I think that speaks to kind of the confidence of Mateer entering the portal. I know that the Miami stuff has been reported about, but it just sounds like that's more of a, yeah, I mean, they can throw silly numbers around and stuff like that, but I don't know how, serious Miami's pursuit is as far as, trying to hijack a visit or stuff like that. I mean, that's portal life, right? And in high school recruiting, it's like you want the last visit to drive it home. The transfer portal, you got to get the first visit because there's no guarantee that a player's going to roll through. If Miami was that serious about it, I think they'd be sending out a PJ to John Mateer trying to get him in Coral Gables today as opposed to Norman, which is where John Mateer currently is. So I don't know, man. The fact that we're hanging out here means that it feels like an if not, or a win not if type situation, if you know what I mean. And it's just kind of the directive today for Oklahoma: dot the I's, cross the T's, and have John Mateer meet a bunch of wide receivers that you've got on campus too to get those guys in the boat as well. That's kind of where I'm at with everything going on here.
Yeah, I thought it was a good sign that Giovanni Gibson, the wide receiver from Pine Bluff, that was made official today. And, there's multiple, up 3 or 4 receivers on campus right now. One of those guys signing today, I do think is a positive sign. If there's anything additional you've heard as far as the tight end from Nebraska, I would butcher his last name. I would say it, Nate Boraker, not really sure exactly how to say that, but him or any of the other wide receivers, is there anything else, Ryan, that you've heard intel on anybody other than Giovanni Gibson? And also a shout out to the OU facility staff. For now, we're going to have a Giovanni Gibson and a Jaden Gibson. So how, are we going to be JAV period and JAY period? But those are good problems to have.
Yeah, it's exactly what they just need to roll to putting nicknames on the back of the jersey. Like the Thunder should just be able to put J-Dub and J-Will on the back and just make it a lot easier. It's all kind of been quiet, which I actually think is a good sign because those guys are visiting, stuff like that. So yeah, it feels like I'm right with you. I will wait for the official pronunciation guide if our friend from Nebraska makes it official, but it feels like that's the first move, right? I look at it as the tight end room of a couple years ago where Jeff Levy was really comfortable with Braden Willis coming in. Then he added Daniel Parker to do a lot of the blocking and things like that. Not that Braden couldn't, but just give another guy to do that. Feels like that's the second move, the Daniel Parker move to whatever Oklahoma's going to do it tight end, joined with Devon Mitchell. But other than that, it's just been really quiet, oddly quiet today, which I usually take as a pretty good sign. Not panic. Guys are just going through the process of rolling through all the oxes, all that stuff. So I would expect this evening for it to pick back up, if not in terms of commits and stuff, at least as far as once the visits have ended. or signees, or whatever the verbiage is. Then it kind of becomes back to the all right, now that they're no longer with the coaching staff, all that stuff. If went well, didn't go well, either way, is kind of when that noise picks back up a bit.
Well, and don't you think too, like when the Branch Bros went on got in the portal last night, it starts to make sense why they don't jump on. I'm not saying we're getting Branch, so people don't turn this around and make it sound like, okay, we're getting the Branch kid. Now, I think it is good that we have reached out to him. I don't think we can afford him. I mean, to be honest with you, especially if we're paying the amount of money, which I think we are to Mateer, it's just not a smart business decision. I mean, you go to the Gibson kid from Arkansas Pine Bluff. They've got the kid from Troy that's there right now. So, I mean, these are good alternatives. Now, if you can land Branch, great. It just makes me, I guess, understand why they didn't jump on some of these receivers that were early on into the portal, because it is a marathon sometimes with this. And we see guys come in. It's like you get on Twitter, the minute somebody says that they're transferring, all the OU people are like, come to OU. We need you. We need you. We need you. Oh, yeah, well, he's perfect for us. I'm like, yeah, you want to pay this guy $3 or $4 million as a receiver? Probably not, because the numbers that I've heard about Zachariah Branch are going to be record-breaking for a receiver in a portal. So I just feel like they have a plan in place, and we need to trust that they have a plan in place. They've had this plan for a while, and we're just kind of jumping off a bridge a little bit just because it's not going as quick as we want it. But, and some of the guys that we lost, it's like, why are we letting Nick Anderson walk? And there's conversations had. There is, Venables has meetings with all these guys. He's got to trim his roster down. So if you have an injury-prone receiver, I love Nick Anderson. I loved Rodney Anderson. They were great for our program. But if they can't get on the football field, then you have to say, you can stay with us, but you're going to have to take a pay cut, kind of like they did with Jackson. So I don't know. What's your thought? Because it drives me crazy with fans. Like, I try to be understanding because I am a fan. This is what this podcast is. But the doom and gloom crap that we have to deal with all the time is so annoying. So, sorry, my dogs are barking too.
No, it's good. My dog, she's chewing her nails in the background, so I'm just hoping that doesn't come through. She's doing her thing. No, it's interesting because with wide receiver, I feel like I'm less prone to panic just because of all the positions in the portal. It feels like wide receiver might be the easiest to get a guy that could come in, and maybe he's not going to come in and be a first round draft pick or something like that. But we're just talking about this Oklahoma offense came from a spot of one of the worst that we've seen, like at the university, not just like in the SEC, all that stuff. So when you're just talking about production, whether you're over the moon about a Giovanni Gibbs, where you think he's a big, underlying guy or not, if he's healthy and available, that's better than 90% of the guys last year. You know what I mean? Like, we're talking about the huge improvements that Oklahoma can make just by having guys that are able to take the field, let's just say 10 times next year, not even 12. So I do wonder if a little bit of the wide receiver market last week was a shot to not like Oklahoma, just everybody, with some of the numbers that feels like we're throwing around for guys that were nice pieces, but it didn't feel like, oh, if that's what you're thinking for a Branch, you know what I mean? And then the second part of that is, if Oklahoma were in a spot like maybe last offseason where it felt like you were adding one or two pieces, but for the most part, you're bringing a lot of guys back, maybe you could pull some of that and really get in the race for a Branch or something like that, or at least put a good foot forward. You certainly saw that, like, defensively with Dominic Williams. That was a spot where you're able to go a little bit bigger than maybe you had thought, and really say, we're going to go and win this. But you're talking about bringing in the highest coveted quarterback in the portal in John Mateer. Talking about bringing in 3 to 4 wide receivers, a couple tight ends, some offensive linemen to shore up your numbers and your depth. And then turn around and what do you need to do to keep our Mason Thomas? What do you need to do to just make sure that no one picks up your Bowens? Like, not that those guys want to leave, but just double check, right? Everyone's tampering all that stuff. What do you need to do to try to make a competitive offer to Dominic Williams again to see if he could stay as like, when you start ticking down all of that stuff, you go, okay, is it really realistic whether you want to do they're broke or not? Or like, even if Oklahoma's got all the money in the world, how many schools are really like breaking the bank and going all in for like either of the branch pros when you know that if that's all the stuff that you've got to do, it looks a lot more like, free agency, right? In the NFL, if you've got a team that I know there's not like an actual cap on college football, but Oklahoma's got limited resources. Everyone to a certain extent has limited resources, and they've got to fill 5 or 6 spots. That doesn't mean they're probably going to break the bank for the top of the market guy. You just have to spread that around for good, solid guys all across the board. You're just going to have big, huge roster weaknesses. I feel like it just makes a lot of sense from like a roster building standpoint. Frankly, I'd rather pay a little bit less at wide receiver and go out and really throw some money at a big time like right tackle or a defensive end to pair with an R. Mason Thomas, knowing that you're losing Ethan Downs and Trace Ford and Cade Wool. Like that's what I would rather do than throw it all at one wide receiver.
I think those are more premium positions. I mean, there's a lot more capable Division I, P4 receivers out there that can play that than there are linemen who can play in the SEC. I mean, Dominic Williams was money.
Stop this crap that we're getting him from Arkansas Pine Bluff that he's a horrible receiver. Like we got Hollywood Brown from the Canyons. I mean, and he's made a lot of money in the NFL. So just stop with the crap where we get these kids from, because there's players all over the nation. So,
and I just think, like you said, we have to allocate our resources correctly and do that well. I say in here almost every week, I'm a believer in what Brent Venables is doing, the plan that he has. I think it's the right plan for Oklahoma, but I think he's had some bad breaks. We bet the farm on Jackson Arnold last year. It didn't work out. And, that's a conversation we've all had. There's no reason to hash all that back up. But that's where we put things. We went into last summer, if we were on here talking in July, or we'll say June, we would have said the receiver room is the room we could withstand some injuries, but it couldn't withstand all the injuries that we had. So I think we need a little bit of luck going forward. But just to kind of get on something that's a little more evergreen than just the recruiting talk that we're on right now, I do feel like with the new schedule that came out last week, I mean, once again, we're still playing the same people, and that's a march of death at the end with the 7 schools kind of that we have to end that. But looking at that, I feel like this is a better schedule for Oklahoma than the one that we had this year. I do like maybe where our buys are better. I like who we have at home better. But are there any thoughts you have, Ryan, with the schedule release last week, and kind of what do you think? Any thoughts you'd like to share with us on that?
Yeah, it feels like if you just push Tennessee way deeper into the season than being kind of that marquee first thing, it feels really similar, right? You get I like that Oklahoma basically has 2 bye weeks for Texas. I know they technically have to field a team against Kent State, but I mean, come on. Whether you are all in or not on Brent Middles and everything, he's done really, really well in those non-conference games. Certainly the ones against the schools like Kent State, that's not a worry. Stuff like that. I like that even when you talk about Michigan, you're going to get the immediate test earlier for what Oklahoma's offense looks like, but Michigan could be breaking in a true freshman in his second game. You know what I mean? Jackson Arnold, you're going to get him really, really, really early on too. So if simply having a more experienced offensive group around him, plus Hugh Freeze, if that's like all the difference that unlocks Jackson Arnold, I think that'll come alive like late October, early November, as opposed to closer to where they were in fall camp in August and September. So like if that's where you're going to get Auburn, I'd rather have Auburn at the start of the year than the end of the year. And then it just kind of it becomes really interesting, right? I don't really know what to make of Ole Miss and Missouri and kind of the turnover there. I certainly would rather have Ole Miss as early as possible, kind of similar train of thought as far as breaking in someone that's not Jackson Dart, who had been there for 3 years, all that stuff. And then with Missouri, it's almost like not that you're banking on injuries or anything like that, but I don't necessarily trust Missouri's depth yet. And so getting them later on in the year, more of a chance for that to kind of take hold. And then, I mean, the Alabama LSU, good luck getting those guys back to back, whether you got the bye week in front of her or not. But it feels like, yeah, even trading off, you had the ghost bye week with Maine in front of Missouri and all that stuff. It feels like that all lined up again where it's been really, really manageable. I don't know if the double buys is going to be something going forward, or for just how Labor Day fell and all that stuff. But I really liked it the last 2 years. And I like how the SEC feels like they're really intentional with, hey, let's try and either give you a bye week that actually makes things manageable, or like we saw this year, Alabama and Georgia, both played that game, come off a bye. OU, Texas both played and come off a bye. I like how they're intentional. Just like, if these are our showpiece games, why not try to make them as ready as possible, get those teams as healthy and ready as possible for those games.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And that's the thing too, is like, you look at their schedule, it's like, heck, it's the same schedule as we had. But I wondered too, after all this stuff happened, if OU tossed around taking Michigan off of their schedule, because, now everybody's talking about what's the point of playing a tough non-conference. Why do you want to keep a Michigan on your schedule? Which I do agree. I think we are putting too much stock into what happened this year. We knew this was going to happen. We knew there were going to be situations where, like, we need to change this up. I think the bracket needs to be formed into more like an NFL style bracket instead, because Oregon, if I'm an Oregon fan, I am pissed, because I think they got the worst draw of all of them and they're undefeated. So I think that does need to change around. But you know what? We got a 12-team playoff. I mean, we get football this weekend, playoff football this weekend. And I really think it's going to eventually go to a 16-team, because if you get a bye, you get a bye. But also, too, these schools that are getting these home playoff games are bringing money into their school, right? I mean, so now they're losing out on that because they had a better season and got a bye. So I do eventually think we will get to a 16-team playoff, and there won't be any byes. So, but that said, you're not going to hear me complaining about a 12-team playoff. If team's going to get screwed, absolutely. But
if we're arguing on who's the 12th best team, that's a lot more fair than arguing who's the 4th best team. I mean,
they kept an undefeated Florida State team out last year. If anybody needs to be griping, it's Florida State. I mean, Florida State wanted to sue people over that, which, I mean,
and named SMU in their lawsuit, which is in the playoff this year. So at least we're not FSU lawyers right now. So things could be worse than being Sooner fans checking Twitter for John Mateer news. So that's all in all not too bad.
A conference lawyer or a lawyer on staff feels like maybe the most secure job right now. Diego Pavea just won his temporary injunction to get his extra year back. That just came down. So it feels like the only people winning in this new system are actually the lawyers that are on staff everywhere, because they're constantly just billable hours all over the place.
Yeah.
I always think you remember the very first year of the 14 playoff where the Big 12 rushed to put a Big 12 championship game in because TCU and Baylor got left out. And in the end, I think the bigger lesson from that was more that the committee more respect TCU and Baylor, whether it's right or otherwise, other than what Oklahoma planned their way in 18 with the rematch to Texas. I think that Oklahoma would have been in every playoff, whether the Big 12 championship was there or not. I was just like maybe caution against making huge, big decisions schedule-wise, specifically, just based off 1 year of playoff data. It's kind of, this was a really weird year where for a while there, it looked like it might be just total chaos, because what if you were having to decide between tiebreakers of SMU, Clemson, and Miami when none of them had played each other, and then that worked itself out just in the ACC alone, all that. And you look at it, and again, for Alabama, they're mad. They're talking about what are you doing with strength of schedule? You lost conference games. Their strength of schedule in the next conference didn't kill them. They went to Wisconsin, won that game, running away. That wasn't a big day. It was, you lost to 6-6, or at the time, 5-5 Oklahoma. That's why you're not in the college football playoff, or learn how to play in the state of Tennessee. That's why you're not in the college football playoff. It's not your non-conference, and so I think that it sounds like at least Sankey and is it Patetti, the new Big Ten commissioner? It sounds like they've at least tossed around.
They've tested us with these names. I mean, it seems like every name is not an Anderson or Turner or anything like that. It's the kid from Stanford. What's his name? Bankalinko. I'm like, I studied that name for probably an hour. I'm like, What can we not? Is there not any Andersons out there anymore?
Well, we signed a Gibson today, Jeremy. So
yeah, I know.
that's not too bad.
But then I looked at his first name and I'm like,
Yeah.
Giovanni? Is that? So
it's like a Key and Peele skit, but yeah. But going back to that, there's just a lot of knee-jerk reactions to a lot of things, and the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, don't schedule because it worked out. Well, no, I think we need to schedule. I think OU fans want to play those games. I think, and I do think, people can have their issues with Joe C, but we've done a really good job over the years of scheduling fun non-conference games. I mean, there's a lot of people who really want to go to the Big House here in a couple of years. There's going to be, we're going to be proud for having Michigan fans coming in and sharing the Palace with those guys. But just because it didn't work one time doesn't mean it's just like going back to the portal. Everyone thinks, we got to spin. But is Ole Miss in the playoff this year? Is Missouri in the playoff this year? Is Miami in the playoff this year? And those are the people that we were told we have to go spend with. And that, spending to fix your problems hasn't been the biggest thing. Like, offensive line is very important. Auburn has signed these cool skill people. They signed Jackson Arnold, who was a big name. They went and got a receiver. But their offensive line is gone, and they've done nothing to address that. And I do feel like we're still trying to do it right, building from the line of scrimmage out with Oklahoma. And I hope we can have enough injury luck that people can see that that's the right path. That's the people who are in the playoff, who are really good up front. I don't think it's the flash of skill people and winning on Twitter that BV is about. That we don't care. I mean, I want to make the playoff next year too. But to me, what can we do to get the 8th national championship? How can we get closer to that? And I do feel like that is what Brent sees. That's what I want to see. But, I mean, what are your kind of thoughts on that, Ryan? Do you think there's a quick fix, or you think, patience is really more of the virtue here?
Yeah, it's the weird, I think if Brent shows, a couple steps forward this year, it doesn't have to be a playoff or bust to necessarily show the faith in rolling forward. And I think, if you look at the defense, you've seen that this past year, Oklahoma's best defense in a really long time was a lot of those guys where you pop up and have Billy Bowman and Robert Spears-Jennings and Eli Bowen and guys that all of those are recruits, right? And guys that sign with Oklahoma. You have Danny and Kip and Kobe, and you have along the defensive line, you're able to get R. Mason and Ethan, and Jade Jackson was huge. And then they said, okay, what do we need? Well, a couple of years ago, they needed a big hoss. So they went out and got a DeJoun Terry, and they were able to keep him for another year, right? You went out, you got a Dominic Williams. If you're able to keep him for another year, that it's kind of I actually didn't mind Ole Miss's roster build this year of bringing back 22 guys that had starting experience. That was your core. And then just going out and adding a little bit more. Now you talk about Oklahoma at the base level. They have a higher high school recruiting ceiling historically than a bunch of these places that are spending like that. So you're telling me that they can do more in the high school ranks, knowing that this is a recruiting staff, and then have to paper it over where you need to, Band-Aid, or go out and spend one guy that you really think. I think that's a good build. It's just a weird offseason because the offense got so sideways, whether it be Brent has talked about owning the mistake of appointing Seth Luttrell, and Joe John Finley is supposed to go out and getting a quarterbacks coach. He rectified that with Ben Arbuckle, right? He got a guy that's going to coach the quarterbacks. You would hope that by proxy of the offensive line being so banged up, they were able to bleed a bunch of those youngsters. And so that's accelerated the development cycle of the offensive line. Now you're looking at just finding someone at right tackle. You simply have to rebuild the wide receiver room. It is what it is. But I feel like if you just look to the defensive side of the ball, the proof of concept was there this year. It's just about showing enough improvement with Arbuckle and potentially Mateer and all that stuff in year one on the offensive side of things to be confident that you give it another year and it'll be more sustained, stuff like that. Because you look at let's just take the Gibson kid that just hit. He's got a couple years of eligibility, so you're not having to turn on and spend again if he's able to come in, be productive, stuff like that. Same with if Mateer is able to come in, be productive, maybe not NFL first round, top overall pick, then you got a quarterback for another year. You know what I mean? It's a model that I think works. It's just it worked on the defensive side of the ball. It's just going to take another year of recouping that on offense to get it reset. And kind of just go back to what you said earlier, it was just a lot of poor injury luck that I think played into a lot of stuff this year, that this was not the year that Oklahoma could withstand all those injuries, plus the one bad coaching hire.
Yeah.
Speaking of bad coaching hires, please tell us that you've heard that Joe John will not be on staff next year. He's going to Purdue, right?
Confirm you would hope
somewhere.
Well, you would hope. You got Josh Henson headed over there to
Henson's headed over there. So.
They need a tight ends coach, though. Purdue does.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll work up there.
Well, and I'm not 100% sure what they're doing. It's like, I understand, like, you can't recruit tight ends if you're not sure that's who's going to be there coaching. But that said, like, eventually you're going to have to make a decision. Are we going forward with him, or is he going to take another job? And I think you have to have a serious conversation with Joe John and be like, are you wanting to look somewhere else? Because, like, we have to move forward in this room. We have a room that is on life support. And they have to bring some players in there. I know the Nebraska kid's almost a slam dunk that he's probably going to come to OU, but so is Mateer. So I don't say anything until it happens. But when it happens, then we're going to get the backlash of, well, did you see how many yards that guy had receiving? Like, there's plans for everything. So just, we aren't the guys running the team. So as fans, we just need to back off. Let them make their decisions, but it is worrisome about the tight end because it needs to be repaired.
Don't you think some of that, Jeremy, is, I think Brent's being loyal, trying to, like, help Joe John get through this, keep a job until he has a job. And I mean, don't you think there is some, I know it sounds silly, but someone to call plays for the bowl game? I mean, is there any, any thought to that? Ryan, do you have any bowl game thoughts? I mean, I know we're a favorite against Navy, but
before
any
we jump
thoughts
on that, I will tell you that I guess because Johns went to OSU and he's already over there, I guess Arbuckle is going to coach the quarterbacks in the bowl game. I don't know Venables said that on the bowl prep show today, and I don't know if that means during the game or he's coaching them at practice. And I don't know the logistics of it, but I do know he's coaching quarterbacks for the bowl game. So I do agree with you on the Joe John and keeping him. I need somebody to call plays. I do agree with that. But eventually Brent's going to have to not be as – loyalty kind of killed it a little bit. Was the Seth Luttrell hire. And Ryan, me and Steve are both from Muskogee. So we try to tamper what we say about Seth because we know him. But that said, it wasn't a good hire. And
he can beat us up.
Yeah, and he could definitely take us out. And my dad knows his dad, and I don't want to get any backlash from it. But that said, it just wasn't a good fit. And I think loyalty with Brent, he's just going to have to be a jerk. I mean, we need that little bit of a jerk. I'm not telling him to be like Switzer, but maybe be like Bob a little bit, because his loyalty is killing him a little bit in some of these disregards. And he needs to maybe just make a decision, have a conversation with Joe John and be like, hey, after the bowl game, I need somebody call plays after the bowl game. Are you here or are you going to be looking? Because if he's looking, you got to get something in place for the tight ends. And so I don't know. What do you think, Ryan, on something like that? It's like, what? How do you tell a guy who's is so highly regarded in the coaching world to start just letting go of his friends? Because that's really what we're trying to tell him. So
you sit Joe John down. You say that your room's been garbage for 2 years. I mean, and sorry, I don't have the big nostalgia, sympathy, anything like that. Like, this is Oklahoma. You just had to have a bunch of those conversations with the real tough conversations are the walk-ons that have done nothing wrong. They've done everything you've asked them to do. And because college football has decided they're coming down to a 105-man roster, they got to go elsewhere. That's a hard conversation. And everyone's got to fail all this stuff. But, hey, your position that you've been in charge of has been one of the biggest weaknesses on the team for 2 straight years. That it's a hard conversation on a personal level. I don't understand what the difficulty's been on the professional level with that. It's like him and Luttrell were tasked with, neither of them have coach quarterbacks full time. Like Brent's hand up. He's like, I failed on that one. Went out and he got himself a quarterback coach. Like he course corrected very quickly, right? It took him 7 games to realize, oh shoot, I should have never hired someone that was not a quarterback coach, or at least didn't arm them with a quarterback coach. Well, now you got to have to make the same evaluation at tight end. So you're just doing tight end. Like, just gonna be totally honest, I'm happy to cover the bowl game because it's football. It's going to be cool to see a service academy because we don't see those a ton at Oklahoma. As far as like play calling in the bowl game, stuff like I'm doing no prep. I don't care about the bowl. Like I'm excited to see what Michael Hawkins Jr. looks like after working with Kevin Johns for a little bit. Because again, he didn't have a quarterback coach. And so I'm talking with Hawk on what was that last Friday? They all run together. You know, he talked about like his footwork being cleaned up a lot and stuff that Kevin John, like that's what I'm like really excited to see. As far as who's calling the plays, put in your 10 plays that you want to use. Here's your different variations of them. I mean, just get in and out of that thing. Let's run the clock. Like, I don't think that should have like.
I think the over-under on that game should be about 3 hours, right?
Yeah,
you know, I mean, like, yeah.
Well, offensively, wasn't that what we did last year? I mean, we brought Seth and Joe John to run our offense, and the whole deal was, well, you know, we're just running just kind of a patchwork offense right now, just putting a few plays in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, do it with Arbuckle. But I understand what they're saying. Like, with the fan base the way it is, if you brought Arbuckle in to coach a bowl game and he didn't put up 50, they'd be like, this offense, boy, it ain't going to work, is it? It's just like that's where they're jumped to.
Yeah, that's not even really like an Oklahoma thing either. Like the only guy I can like really remember doing anything like that is Dana Holgerson this year at Nebraska. Like last year, why they were able to do that is because Luttrell was still in the meeting rooms, right, as an analyst. So he at least knew the verbiage, all that stuff, and it just became we're going to use Levy's verbiage and not try to install a bunch of new stuff to try and make this on-ramp as smooth as possible for Jackson. And then the install really happens in the spring. I totally understand not wanting to – it's honestly a waste of Ben Arbuckle's time to get bogged down in what was the old verbiage for 2.5 weeks when you're going to wipe all that away and bring yours in the second the bowl game's over. So, like, I get that if you want to bring him in for some mechanical stuff with the quarterbacks and all that jazz that's not really, you know, like, specific to this player, this call, like that, all totally cool with it, fine with that. If you just want to have him around the guys so they get a vibe of what he looks like on a game day, sounds great, all that stuff. But it's one of those things of excited to see Michael Hawkins just off of what kind of development he's done at practice. But other than that, it's get in, get out, turn the page to 2025, and come December 28th, start the competition at every spot to try and be as good as you can in 2025.
I agree. Well, do we want – I know we've talked about football and get to maybe a little bit happier times right now. Like we have a top 15 basketball program that beat the life out of – I mean, completely dominated OSU and dropped in the polls. So if I could tell OU basketball anything, I would say don't dominate a team. Maybe play really bad in the first half like you did against Alcorn State and then dominate the second half. But before we jump into that, Hayes Fawcett, who's always trying to get clicks on Twitter, just put some pretty notable transfer portal commitments coming this evening. So that's just to make sure that all the OU fans who have been refreshing their Twitter machine is still doing it. So take what you want with that. But
I'm hoping we get General Booty's new destination. That's what I'm hoping we get out.
That's it. Yes.
That's what I want, Hayes. Give it to me.
So probably the biggest game to me of the season for OU basketball tonight was against Michigan. I don't think we match up very well with them with the size they have. That's our Achilles heel in my regards. But
you were not impressed by the Sam Godwin legacy game against OSU? You had the Sam Godwin legacy game, 20-14 against OSU. But yeah, Ryan, go ahead. Tell us kind of your OU hoops thoughts a little bit.
Well, first off, I've said this a couple of times this week. Oklahoma needs to manufacture a trophy for every game and let Sam Godwin know it's on the line. That his mantle can be littered by a ton of trophies if he simply does that. Yeah, I mean, you got a couple 7-footers tonight. Godwin's foul trouble is always really an issue, but it's a weird game with how the SEC is kind of like athletic in a different way with their bigs. And I don't know if if Michigan's front court is really going to be indicative of what Oklahoma's going to see night in, night out in SEC play. So I don't think it's like a break glass in case of emergency or anything type moment if they don't win this one tonight. It's just kind of more about, I think if you watch it, it looks a lot different than last year. Certainly what Jeremiah Beers can do, and Duke Miles and Kobe Elvis. I think every one of those guys individually would probably be the best just creator that Porter Moser has had, or most dynamic guy. Then you piece it all together, and it certainly feels like there's more depth there. We still haven't even seen like Jadon Jones. Bryson Gooding's been kind of in and out with the ankle. So you feel good there. It's just, for me, it's about going from a Saturday, Wednesday against like that OSU team is really bad. Well, it felt like once they repelled the first drive, they just totally lost their mind and had no idea how to do anything, which resulted in a ton of those really bad threes. And that's what Porter's defense can do to a team. But to me, it's more about how can they carry over the grind from a weekend, midweek, because that's what we've seen in the last couple of years in the Big 12 plays. They get there and you're in the meat grinder. It's going to be the same thing mentally this year, right? The SEC of OU's first 5 games in SEC play, South Carolina, I think, is the only team that's not in the KenPom top 40. So you're going to be.
And South Carolina beat Clemson last night.
Yeah.
So
that was I was checking on Monday too, right? So it's like that's as of now. You look at it, you still got a top 5 Alabama. It's going to be very similar, I think, to the experience Oklahoma had in the Big 12. It just becomes can these guys kind of withstand that? And I think that's what I'm most interested in tonight, just because we've seen Michigan in a couple big games so far this year, and they're pretty physical. So I think if Oklahoma's having any dead legs from getting stretched a little bit more against Oklahoma State, not that it looked like they did, certainly with the score and how just leisurely it was, but just a different level of emotional game there, roll into a really physical game. That's what I'm most curious by, because I think that a lot of people will be forgiven if you're waiting until mid to late January to really pass judgment on this team, just because it's not fair to these guys what happened last year, but I totally get it based off what happened last year.
Well, this is 10-0, just like last year, going into the Jumpman game, just like last year. Last year we went and we're really just outclassed by Carolina. Unfortunately, we were. And, looking at like the net, we've got some good wins. Arizona, Louisville, Providence, I think are all. But if you look, none of those teams are in the top 40 if you look at net rankings. And I do think Michigan would be a feather in that cap. But to me, Ryan, and I think you touched on this a little bit, this does feel different. And I do think Jeremiah Fears is a legitimate number 1 option, who's a guy who can create. Porter Moser basketball that we've seen, they're going to play tough defense everywhere. I wish we played on an NBA court all the time, because he forces a lot of contested threes. And players are going to shoot NBA threes. There's an NBA line out there, and they're going to shoot a worse percentage. But I don't think the Thunder are going to let us play all of our games at Chesapeake. But that being said, to me, that's the major difference is Jalen Moore came back, which we haven't had anybody that was good come back before. That was huge for Porter. And I do think getting Jeremiah Fears to reclassify was the biggest win of the Porter Moser era so far, because we need to make the tournament this year. We do. We need that for Porter. We need it for OU basketball. As Sooner fans, we just need some more positive things in our life. As good as it is that the women are in the top 10, we need a men's sport team to pick up a little bit of slack here too.
Yeah, something before softball.
Yeah, something before softball. I think that Diamond Sports should be fun. We're gonna have a really weird bleed of the women's run plus softball and baseball getting going. It'd be nice to throw men's basketball in there as well. But yeah, Beers, what he can just do. My favorite play of his in that game was where it was the second half, and he's just absolutely crashing in. Looks like it's going to be a really weird contested layup, and it's just a little feathered dump off to Godwin in the pocket with just an easy slam. And he just absorbed the entire Oklahoma State defense, because he's a guard that defenses go, oh, shoot, we got to get over there and really glob to that. That's going to lead to not just the Godwin dump off, but more open threes, things like that. And then, I think the best news for Jalen Moore as far as his development has been not just the really nice scoring output games, but you look at a couple of the ones here over the last couple of weeks. Georgia Tech wasn't super efficient from the floor. What did he do? got to the free throw line, still affected the game, got into double digits, double figures. Oklahoma State wasn't super efficient from the floor early. What did he do? Put his head down, got to the free throw line, got some bigs in foul trouble, still was able to kind of give Oklahoma that steady diet offensively. And it's felt kind of like, for different reasons, Thunder basketball and OU basketball the last couple of years have been some of the least the teams have gotten the least amount of whistle, while it's like no one was going to give Tanner Groves the whistle, going down in. No, Jalen McCollum was always trying to take a half step away from the bucket to shoot. Grant Sherfield was always trying to fade away and shoot. Feels like you've got Beers who can go downhill. Jalen Moore can go downhill in some different ways. Just got to keep Sam Godwin out of foul trouble. If he can stay out of foul trouble, then they're really cooking.
Yeah. And you're going to watch if OU, they got to knock down some threes. They got to shoot a high percentage from threes tonight to win this game, because we got to pull those bigs out. But if OU beats Michigan, everybody's really timid about drinking the OU basketball Kool-Aid. They'll be taking big gulps of it, I think, if they happen to beat Michigan tonight. That's a big win. It's a top 25 win. So we'll see. But man, we ain't going to keep you much longer. I said we weren't going to go as long as we did last week. 41 minutes ain't bad. Pretty good, I would say. But
just slide right in there. Just dip it in.
Yeah. Ryan, dude, you're awesome, man. I appreciate you jumping on with us. Guys, if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, please do. It doesn't cost you a dime, but it helps us out. We got to 2,100 views our last video. Let's keep them coming. This is fun. We enjoy having you guys come on with us, Ryan. It's means a lot to me and Steve, us little OU fans that starting this thing out, and it's been a good response from it so far, so we really appreciate that. On our podcast, you can get us on Apple, Spotify, follow us, do all the things, click that like button. I don't know why the kids say click that like button. I don't know what all they say, but subscribe to our YouTube. That seems to be where we're getting the most traction. Also, Steve, what were you talking? We were talking about, we're looking for sponsors for our podcast. Want to be able to edit this a little bit better, put a better product out there for you guys. So yeah, if any businesses out there would be interested in sponsoring us, email or comment on here, and I can give you my email, and we can maybe get the ball rolling. But Steve, you got anything else to add?
No, just Ryan wants to. Ryan, want to give you a second. Just kind of plug your show, plug all your stuff. Go ahead, and then I'll finish it up.
Yeah, it's start the day over at the Franchise, Monday through Friday, 6 to 10 a.m. The app's everywhere. Just search the Franchise. It's the easiest spot to be. You never know what Eddie and I are going to get into. We do no show prep, and that is why I think it happens like that it just rolls off. Then I slide over to the website side of things, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Have a really cool team over there. Obviously, John Hoover, who's been doing it forever. We just brought on Carson Field, who's doing a great job, doing a lot of our men's hoop coverage as I've slid over and done the women. So Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, over there on the Franchise. As always, we appreciate the coolest days for me are game days, and we get the huge reaction from a bunch of guys out there, pregame, all that stuff. So always appreciative of that and everyone that rolls through.
Yeah. Well, once again, Ryan, thanks. Jeremy, once again, like Jeremy said, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We will tell you what, we will put our Soonercast email on the comments for you guys, so you can see that. Make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Again, thanks for listening, and Boomer
Sooner.